Hello everyone, welcome to Zaref Game Dev. In this video, I am going to create the Snakes and Ladders game in Unity. So let's first start by creating the design document. So in the design document, first this is the image, how it will look. It may look differently when we create it. Let's first see the basic outline. What are the rules of the game? So it's played on a 10 cross 10 board. There are 100 positions and there are 2 to 6 players, and each player has a game piece. And at the start of the game, the player is at the starting position, and on each turn, the player will roll a die and it will move the number of steps depending on the roll. And if it steps on a ladder or a snake, it will increase or decrease the respective position, and the game will finish whenever we reach the end, so which is the 100th position. So in the basic script, as we can see, we need the start button, the quit button, the title text, and the message text, and then we have the board, and it will have nothing, but we'll instantiate game pieces on this board. So we'll just need the positions of each objects, and then we have the die. Not created here because I created it as a multiple sprite and I cannot cut it here. So there will be a die here, and that's gonna be it for the basic elements. So let's see how I'll create in the Visual Script. So first we'll create the basic scene. So we'll delete the empty scene and create a new scene and rename it gameplay. We'll add the title text, which is Snakes and Ladders, and then we'll add the 2 buttons, and then we'll create the game manager, and inside game manager we'll add the 2 functions for the game restart and the game quit. So that was just for the beginning. So when we start the game, we should be able to see the 2 buttons and the title text, and then we'll import all the sprites, and let's create a board out of the board prefab. And after we create the board prefab, we are not going to do anything. So the second step will add the animations to the die, and we'll check if we are clicking the die. So uh, we'll create a prefab out of the die. It's gonna be a sprite. We'll add box collider 2D and set is trigger to true, and we'll add an animation animator controller to it, so we can animate it, and we'll add a die script to it. So inside die script, for just the animations, we are going to have the random image function, which we'll call in the animation, and then we'll have the set image function, which we'll call at the end of the animation, and a function for the role, which will play the animator, which will need to call from the game manager, and the index of the role, so we can know which role we are playing, and we'll set a list of sprites so we can know what sprites we need to show. And that's it for the die. Next, in the game manager, first we'll need a boolean for has game finished and can click, and then we'll do a integer for role, and in the awake we'll set game finish to false and can click to. So next up in the update, we'll first check if the game is finished or we cannot click, then we won't do anything. And then we'll check if the mouse button is pressed, then we'll do the raycast, and if we click the die, then we'll call the roll function, and the roll function will play the roll animation, and the roll animation will, on each frame, it will call the random image function, which sets a random image, and when the uh, animation ends, it will set the set image function. So inside the set image function will, depending on the roll, so if we roll a 5, it will show the fifth sprite, which contains the 5. So after this step, we should have our die rolling. So after rolling the die, we need to instantiate the players. So the players are going to be instantiated at the start position. So let's create a player prefab first. So the player prefab is created, and then we'll add a player script to it. And inside the player script, we'll add a function set color, and it will set the color of the player depending on the red, blue, or yellow. And it will take a parameter of player we are going to create in the board. It is of the enum, and depending on that player, it will set the color. So that's for the player. And in the game manager, in the wake function, we'll create 4 players. So we'll create a for int less than 4 loop, will reference to a game object, will set that game object's transform dot position to the start position, and we'll call the set color function on that game object. So we should have the players ready. Now we need to get a reference to all that players. So we'll add a dictionary which goes from player to that game piece. We'll do it afterwards. So we have our players instantiated. Next we need the board. So inside the board we have the enum, and we have the 100 uh, uh, 100 uh, array of size 100, which contains the jumps. So if we can jump from there, so if there is a snake or a ladder, then we'll set its position to that jump, else we'll just set it to -1. And next we'll add a dictionary which stores the player's position. So we'll get that position from the player, and when we reference to the player, we'll get the integer. So in the constructor, we'll just initialize the player position. So the player position are just going to be 0 because at the beginning everything is 0. And the ladders we are going to get from the game manager. So in the game manager, first will create the transforms for all the positions. So at every index, at what position we need to move, just like the start pause. And next we have the dictionary from integer to integer of joints. So it just reference to start position to the end position. Start position of the key, and the end position is the value. This is for the snakes and the ladders. And for the index at the start position, whenever a reference to the start position, we'll get the end position. So we'll set it up the constructor, and the game will have a update position function, and inside update position we'll just pass the current player and the role, whatever we are rolling. And for the role, we'll just add 1 to the player position till roll dot count. And if last member is greater than 99, means we think got past the 99th number, so it is not possible. So we'll return an empty list, and the update position is going to return a list of integers. So the first integer will add 1, and then we'll add to that list. So it will add the next the roll amounts of integers inside it. And if the last roll amount contains a snake or a ladder, we'll reference from that snakes and ladders, and we'll also add that integer to that, and we'll set the player's position to that integer. And if it is not null, then we'll add it to the list. Means it, if it is not equal to -1, because that for default we have everything as -1. But if it is not -1, then we have a ladder or a snake at it. So we'll set it accordingly. So depending on this function, we should be able to update the position on the roll. Now we have instantiated the player, we have created the board. Now we need to move the player. So to move the player, we'll move the player after we have rolled. So we'll create the move piece player in the game manager, and we'll call that move piece when the animation is finished. So inside the set image, we'll call the move piece function. The move piece function will first get the results. So we'll get results depending on the role and the player. And if results dot count is equals to 0, then we won't do anything and we'll get to the next turn. And the next turn is just we are going to get it from the current player, and we'll increase the current player plus plus, so we'll get the next turn. And if it is not 0, then we'll call the move function and we'll set can click to true. And if we have reached the end, then we'll remove that player from the list and we'll set the current player. And if only the last player is remaining, then we'll finish. And if we roll a 6, then uh, we won't increase the current player because we don't need to change the current we don't need to change the player. The same player will be playing the next role. And if we don't roll a 6, then it will change the current player. So inside the piece, it will just check if we can move, then we'll return. If we cannot move, then we'll move towards the position which we have created in the game manager instance. And what position we are going to move? uh, First we have the 0th index, so we'll move to the first position, which is the move pause of move index, which is 0. And inside the piece, whenever we call the set movement, we'll set the movement to positions and can move to true. So at first we'll get the array of integers at what index we'll need to move, and we'll start moving. When we start moving, it will move to the first position and then check if the distance is less than 0.001 f, then the index is increased. So at the next turn we'll move to the next position, and till we will move when the move index equals movement dot count. So till we reach the last position, this move index will equal to movement move pose dot count, and then we can stop moving. So we'll set can move to false, and we'll set the move index to 0. So whenever the next time the function is called, we can start from the 0th position. And so after this step, the player should be moving depending on the role or the list of the positions we are going to pass. Now we need to show the whatever turn the player is playing. So we'll do something new here. So we'll use events and delegates. So it's going to be easy. First we'll create a delegate. It's going to be a function. Uh, it's going to be a delegate, and the delegate name is update message, and we'll pass the player to it, and we'll call an event depending on the delegate. We'll rename it to message, and we'll call message side whenever the turn is finished or before we set the can click to true. And inside the message script, we'll create a UI, and inside that UI we'll subscribe to this update message event. So inside the message script, the awake function will first get the text inside the text. So it's just going to be the game start text, and in the start function we'll subscribe to that events. We'll subscribe it as game manager dot instance, and in that instance we have message. So game manager dot instance dot message, and then we'll subscribe to that event. So we'll do plus equals to, and what we need to subscribe, the function we need to subscribe, the update message. So whenever the message event is called, the update message will be called, and inside update message we are just going to set the text of the player, and we'll change the enum to string. We'll set its text. So after all these steps, we should be having all the turns. So we'll check the functionality for the game finished, which will be in the game manager when we move the players. The move the player when the players dot count is equals to 1, and we'll finish the game, and we'll set it to be a boolean, so as game finished. And if the game has finished, and in the update message we'll check game manager instance dot has game finished, we'll set the text to game finished. It's just going to be fine. I've created everything iteratively, so I'll check if it is working, and then I'll create all the functionalities and test it faster, because uh, rather than coding, I can just use words and define it and code it later. So let's go inside Unity. So inside Unity, the basics in setup. So first I have created the gameplay scene and deleted the sample scene. And in the gameplay scene, first I added the UI. First I added the title text, which is added, and set up the title text. Next up, we have the two buttons, which are the start and the quit button. The start restarts the game, and the quit quits the game. And the game manager, I already created it. So the game manager contains the game manager script. And in the game manager script, we have the game quit and the game restart function, which we are going to uh, add add as a listener to that buttons. So that's it for the basic we have created in the previous videos, so I'm not going over it again. If you watch how I created it for to the previous videos. So next up, I haven't added any prefabs for now, but I imported all the sprites and set its sprite length or splice or whatever. So let's first add the boards. So let's change the board size to 5.6, and that's just for the board. Now let's add the dice. So die, and we'll add it as a prefab. That is the next one. And let's save it as a prefab. So inside the die, we need box slider 2D, that is trigger to true, and the tag. Inside the tag, the die, and let's delete it directly. So inside the die, let's change the tag to die. Let's create a script and call it die script or die. Add the die script, the die. So we have the script added. Now we need to create the animator controller. Inside the animator controller, call it die controller, and inside die controller, let's add an animator to the die. Let's add the die controller to the animator controller, and let's open the animation and the animator. So the animator, and there's the so let's first click on the dice. Let's create a idle animation, and we'll set the samples to 2, and set the animator for the idle set the loop. So that's it for the idle animation. Create one more animation, and we'll call it roll. And inside roll, let's make it size of 6. And inside roll, we'll add events. So it will be a 2-second animation, and for the events we need to get it from the die script. So let's add an event, and there is no affected because we don't have any function created for now. So let's go inside the die and let's create the function. So let's go inside Visual Studio, dialog die script. So we have the die script, and inside the die script we have the start and the update functions. And first we need a role, because which image we need to set it depending on the role. And next we have the serialize field and the list of sprites, and we'll call it die. Set it in the inspector, and we have the update methods are required. Then we have the random image functions, the public void random image function will just set the renderer equals to get component renderer, and it will set its image to a random image. Error dot sprite equals to die at m dot range from 0 to die dot count. So it will set a random image, and next we'll have the set image. So we'll call it public void. Inside set image, we'll set instead of the random dot range, we'll set it to roll, and the roll is going to be 1 to 6, so we need to decrease it by 1. We'll set it to row minus. So that was the random image. Then we have a public void role. Need to call from the game manager, and it will set the role equals to its role is equals to, and star equals to animator, and we'll play the role animation. So we'll call animator dot play a role, and -1 will start from, so it will play the role animation, and that's it for the die. So in the game manager we need to check if we are clicking it. So let's first add a public bool as game finished, can click. Let's add a wake method. Wake adds at the game. Destroy game object. So we can reference the game manager from anywhere, and first we'll set can click go, and as game finished. Now let's do the update function. Inside the update function, If has game finished or and or cannot click, just return the update function because we do anything if we are not click it. And this update function just checks for the click, so set it in the update or different. So we'll get input dot get mouse button down of 0, get the 0th mouse button, and when we get it, what we'll do is we'll check for a collision goes to camera dot main dot world point and then input dot position v2, call it mouse v is equals to new v2 mouse pose dot x y. We'll create a raycast from it, so it will be cast to it will be from 2d dot raycast post 2d v2 dot 0. And if we don't hit anything, so if slider will just return, and if dot collider dot compare tag to the die, and what we'll do is we'll call that whenever we click, first we need to set the role. Let's create an integer for it. So let's role plus 0 2 0 1 2 3. We have the role, then we'll call hit slider dot game object dot get component and insert the die, call the role or the role and say can click is equals to false, and inside the die we'll say game manager and can click, so we can so the scripts are okay, there is no error. Let's go inside Unity and let's add all the bytes. And let's add the sprites first, then go add it 6. Now let's hit play. There are no errors. We are not added the dice, so showing tag header is working, and inside the die we are not created them. So for click on die, idle. Idle is not installable. Let's Add this, copy the animation, paste it. Pass. And and so should be working. The animation is full. It's okay. Position negative 3.5. Hit play. Let's see. Okay, so the animation is playing and it's looping. We need to set the looping to false. Okay, add the here. Roll we need roll the 4 and we can see that roll when we hit the scene. We have the game here and we are not made it public. Read, but whenever you click the game, please get roll. So oh, 1. Next up we'll have 6. So the role is working correctly. Now let's create layers. Let's close all these animation tabs. Already created it, so we have completed the first step. Now let's create the player. Player. Let's go with the right, right there, and add the zoom text to, and we'll create a preview out of it. Let's create a piece. Add the prefabs. Let's add the piece script. We are just going to change the color and the positions to added the script. Let's uh, hit the piece script. So create the player at the so let's on the piece. So inside the piece script, first need is the colors function to set the color. See colors. Colors. Function to set the colors. It after the updates, call it public void colors. Need to pass layers. Haven't created it layers. Create the board script first. Create a board code, code script, get some behavior, and add the constructor. For here, create a public key here. Alright. So inside the piece, call it depend here. We'll set the sprite color. Uh, we'll set the sprite color depending on it to integer. Colors and ask it here. So that's it for the set color. Create the game object. Let's create two game pieces. So as it as plus object transposition. Create a vector 3 out of it. Vector temp dot component. Set the color. Player. So two game objects will be created. Let's see if it is working. Let's add all the rights bits and there are no errors. Let's set this. Add the game. One. Why? Why? Into 0 to 5. 2.0 to 5 and 8. Okay. We should have pairs. Pair close. There was an error. So ILS is we have not set the colors, so set the colors were inside. Colors we can get from we need to get the colors right. Okay, so we should have two layers. Uh, Set it to 4. Should have 4 players, and yellow is the last, so it will be at the top. We have created the players, have instantiated the players. So let's now add the board script so we can get the reference to the players and update it. So let's go inside the board script. I before creating the board, we need to create the joints and transform. Let's go inside manager, inside the game manager, get a reference to the dictionary from players to text, players to players from players, and transform will be fine. Array vector 3. So let's first create the dictionary, code it because dictionary is not serializable, and let's add the dictionary of the ladders. Create. Let's first create the words public board, and to the board we'll create the list of current call it player and set an index to the current player. After that, we have already the start position. Vector 3 array position, the dictionary or headers here to here, and dictionary from player to game object. We'll call it P. So whenever we pass player to it, we can get the inside the awake function when it up. So let's add Let's add it to the player. So first we'll add to the player. So players.add will pass it to a player and go to four players to the players. Create it. After instantiating it, this type I. Right? Player is a 0. Code, code, both the dictionaries. Players is players and before doing that, we need to set up the position. So joints created and first we'll call its positions. It is going. So inside ladders, just create a new dictionary. Join of year to integer. So second goes from two. Next one goes from 9 to we have 2 to 73 to 91 to 69 and 96 to 24. So these are just the ladders. Now we need to set up the position. So the positions will First, create a new vector 3 of 100 length. We'll set the 0th position to the start pose. 0 start. After that, let's I plus and for is equal to 0 plus we'll set the positions at that entry position vector 3 check I need to increase that difference, but will increase the index. Going to be the similar adding here, adding to position it to the and we'll check if index is correct. We'll set it up again here. So it goes like first we go towards the right, then we move towards, then towards the left, and then we move one position upward. And if that last position changes to 100, we won't move it. So we have set up the positions. Now we need to get the position inside the boards. So at the board, I have a list not dictionary joint at the game manager when creating the new board. Created the joints, added the joints, go inside the boards. First, we need first we need to set tables, the dictionary, here, here, call it airport, have array of years with years, created years, and let's add the Here, cast it. Here's ladder set for each value pair. Solid joint. Will update the ladders. The speed value. So we have all the start positions. Create breadboard. Search analysis here. Call it update board. Will pass current player the role. That's get a result. List side here. So I less than role. Player pose at here. Then is the player pose. Let's the player pose. Player pose player and add it to the result. Dot add here. Now we'll check if there is one. Return this, this and we'll update the player pose there. Deduct that. Valid position, and if ladders add result dot not equal to minus. If it is not -1, we'll pairs position at pairs result of player pose and player function to get the ladder. Result dot add pose will return the result. So there should be no problems. What's remaining is, yes, let's go inside Unity and see if there are any errors. Play game objects. Let's see if the positions are correct. We'll, we'll check it afterwards, the position. So the next step we have is moving the, so to move the player, all after we have rolled the die. So inside the roll die, call the move player is inside the game manager. Let's create that studio, and let's first go inside the die. Side, it's setting it to true here. Create a function. Let public void move piece. Call it from the die. Call as game manager dot move piece. Did I create it? Game manager instance dot move, and let's go inside move piece. So whenever move piece is created, get the result, and we'll get the result as current player. Let's get the results. So it's the list. Here's pause, here pause, equals to my board, breadboard, as the players, players, player, and the next one is going to be full. And next we need to do is check if count 0. Let's see. Created the board. Now game manager, first we'll get the results. So first we'll see what name. Let's call it result. By result, we'll first check if result dot count is equals to 0. Will do nothing, but what we need to do is we'll say can set to true, and we'll say current player to player plus 1 percentage players dot. and done. Is not 0. This the piece players add player dot get component is- and call the set movement method. Add movement, pass the will it to will check for if the game has finished. These the roles. Yeah. Select current player. 2 role is equals to 6. Player player plus 1 page players dot. Now let's check for the game finish. Result dot count 1. Move that player first. Players dot move act. Next player removing player for return. Check if players count 1 as game. So the move piece should be working fine. We should be able to click it. Now go inside the piece, movement functionality. So the movement for the movement, we'll need a couple of variables. So first variable is going to check move. We can move, and next up we have index. We have a list of move positions. Let's go here. Check, last we have this. Put it to the inside the start method. Can move to false and move index. After set color, have the set void. Will pass the parameter of the player, list of integers. We call it result. Game manager won't show any error. Set move pose. Move is equals to. So for moving, first we'll check if not can move. Done. Else, first we'll do is step at the trans dot words and from position target position get index result move pause index game manager. Since three, move towards target pose. This. We'll check if your distance is less. 3 dot distance. Form dot will get for less than 10 is the index, and if no index was dot count, set the index to 0, and can move to false. We cannot move and position. So it should work correctly. At the game manager, we have. Now let's go inside Unity. Let's fix all the errors. So okay, is working. In one, so it move towards this ladder. 6 is the position by 6, and press again, but here. So we have all 4 players going. Perfectly fine. There was no error. It's rare because I always get error whenever I create a game. So let's create the event. The event is just going text. So let's duplicate the title text. Let's rename it to message. Let's set the message to game start. Position it at relatively. Position it at negative. Set the sign 1 0 int. Okay. Now let's create a message script. Edit. Let's call it turn, and let's open the. Let's add the turn script to the message. Add the message, the turn script, and yep, that's only it's remaining. So let's go inside Visual Studio and let's open up the turn script. So we are going to create an event in the game manager. So to need to create an event, first we need to create a delegate. So we'll call it public delegate void, and we'll call it update message, and it will take a parameter of player. We need to create an event, click event, call it message, public event update message, and call it message. Whenever we need to call the message, when before returning or the function ends, we'll pass the players at current players. So pass message, will players again paste here. So inside the turn script, first we'll have text. Load the text. Use the Unity engine.ui, and inside Unity engine.ui, we'll create the text. Just call it my text. We'll refer to the text in the start function, or text text component text, my text. Type to that method. We'll create that method first. It the player, and what it will do, string, let's just text is equals to player dot to string, player string plus turn, and we need to change it. If game manager dot has game finished, if game has finished, and we'll say game we need to subscribe the update message. So game manager dot instance dot message plus equals to, so it should be working fine. Now let's see if it is working. So let's go inside Unity and let's play the games. So we have the start, but so let's check the functionalities. Start, it restarts the game and quits the game. Let's play it again, and it should show blue turn. So turn up the blue turn, and next we'll have the green turn, and next we'll have the yellow turn. So all the turns are working correctly, and depending on what we have done at the end, it should work. But I got errors whenever I created it first, so it's always necessary to double check if all the functionality is working, because whenever I reach the end and if the index increase, I forgot to update the player's position, so it always went beyond 100 and it got an out of range error. So I already done it correctly, so perfectly fine. And whenever the game will be finished, show the game finished text here. This is how I've created the adders game. And to make it fancier, you can add a good board, good animations, and look like a production type build games. So that was it for this video. If you liked how I've shown, I have created the game, do like and subscribe the channel. And if you want to get the assets, comment on the video, so I'll try to add a GitHub link whenever will be possible, maybe after a week or two. So thank you for watching, and see you guys in the next video.